Hey guys, Thomas Sulu Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review The Greatest Showman. So, as you can see, I'm still trying to catch up on 2017 films, and this is one of them that I had planned to watch, and I finally got the time to do it. And as far as doing a top 10 and top worst of 2017, that's going to be put on hold until I can watch and review the rest of the movies that I am looking forward to that came out a little bit later this year, that came at the really close end. I want to make sure that none of these movies, or, see if any of these movies could very well make that list. So I wanted to make sure that I watched these movies before I put up that review or my top count of worst and best of 2017. So with that being said, this is my review of The Greatest Showman. So this movie starts out in, well, a circus, and it shows the main character, Mr. Burnham, I believe his name was, as doing this grandiose performance, and the fans are super into it, and he ends up, like, in this little shadow, like, oh, I'm all alone moment, and it cuts back to his childhood, so it was a transition into seeing how he grew up, and seeing this girl he liked named Charity, who was like this fancy girl, or fancier girl than he was at that point in time. But he was like messing around, and that caught her attention. But in the face of that, that got him a little bit of a slap. But regardless, he is able to take her away from that scenario and to this like beach-like area and sing to her. So he's like bringing her around to this like old house, and he's like doing his moments and stuff like that. We find out that her name is Charity. In the process of moving around and being in the situation he is, I guess he needs to steal food, but he ends up getting caught. And he's offered this apple by this woman who has quite a face to her, but he accepts it regardless of what she looked like. And he starts off getting this job as like a paper boy, but then he hears like this announcement about like some sort of show, and then that is what leads him to adulthood. It cuts back to him being an adult, and now hanging out with Charity as she is an adult as well. They end up like dancing through the town and singing and all that stuff. They end up on this cool roof, doing this really cool musical. And I will say the music in this, all the music is very similar in its tone. Most of the songs are upbeat and have this very similar sounding. They have this very similar sound, I should say, which makes it easy to like go, oh, that sounds like that previous song, but it has different lyrics. Like the tone of it is very consistent, unless they're doing a very sad song, which does come up, I believe, twice in the movie. So we see a little time go by, and he's like talking to this man. We see him get Charity pregnant. They end up having 2 daughters. They end up getting married. All the good stuff seems to be happening with him. So he tells his daughters like this little story with like this spinning lantern, and tells them like, oh, your dreams can come true if you wish upon it. And so he gets called into this office where he gets to visit this museum, and he says that this could be the very foundation of like essentially where they can start this like little show. So the family helps him out, sending out these flyers, but the people are like, we're not into it. They reject the flyers at this point in time. So the family did feel bad, so they ended up buying 3 tickets in order to make him feel better. So we see him then talk to someone he visited earlier, which is like this, I guess I'll refer to it as a small person, small, but he has the voice of an adult. He is an adult, but he's just small. So he gets this idea to remake a poster, and this time is to promote trying to get these other unique people to join his squad. I guess I'll call them for now. He meets what I'll essentially call the bearded lady. I believe that's what they actually called it in the movie, in the poster when they showed it. They show various other unique people coming in, and as soon as they accept, they transition into the poster and what their title is in the circus. So he creates Barnum's Circus, and he sings as the poster comes down, and the people are actually pretty, they're pretty intrigued now, which, but they do start getting these odd looks at first, and then as soon as they start performing or start, just embracing it, they start to gain this admiration. So, when they really get into it, the people start clapping for them, and the shows start to get sold out. He's like talking, Barnum's like talking to this businessman, and they get invited to this like fancy place where one of his daughters is getting into ballet. But, he's like talking about, I forgot what he was like talking about. Like he ends up like upsetting Charity about something. I didn't quite catch it. I was like, But anyway, he meets this guy named Philip, who is played by Zac Efron, which I'm not surprised that someone who has previous musical talent is a part of this as well. So he's trying to get this guy who's like this part of this rich family essentially to help join him. So he's trying to get Philip on board, and he's like singing to trying to get him to join. They get a few drinks, and it's like this whole drinking musical numbers like all about trying to get him on board, and he eventually settles on like 10% of the earnings of the circus. And as soon as he enters the circus, he ends up like falling in love immediately with the trapeze girl. I don't remember her name. I think it was Jenny or Annie. I got those two mixed up when I was writing this review. I believe it was Jenny that was the trapeze girl, and Annie was like this other girl that comes in later on. But anyways, so yeah, he has his whole thing, and meanwhile, while that's going on, there are a separate group of people that are boycotting the circus. They're like saying, "Oh, you're freaks" and all that good stuff, and whatever. But while that's going on inside, they are actually getting good news and getting invited to perform, or to just go to see the Queen of England. So they end up going, and they end up meeting the high class lady who has red hair. I believe she was Jenny. I could be getting those two mixed up. Their names are very similar, so I'm sorry if I got them mixed up. But anyway, I'll just refer to her as the red-haired lady, just to keep myself memorized in who she is. So anyway, she ends up singing to this crowd, and the performance is absolutely phenomenal. The people are just going encore and stuff like that. And Barnum is talking to her with her family, with his family, I should say, and, introducing each other and stuff like that. Charity seems a bit upset again, and I think that was out of jealousy at that time. But anyways, like, Barnum is in this sophisticated area, and the rest of his circus team are, like, coming in, and he like holds them back from entering inside the main building. But the bearded lady ends up singing to the rest of the circus to uplift them, to gain the confidence to go out there, to go out to even where the people are like, like criticizing them and doing all that stuff, but they're still doing their little performance regardless. So Philip ends up talking about the shows with Barnum, but afterwards, he ends up going to the trapeze lady. I'll just refer to her as the trapeze lady because I don't want to keep getting them confused. So anyways, we cut to more of the red-haired lady. Oh, I'm sorry, the trapeze lady is still part of her story, like, where, Philip and her are, like, having this thing, and then I think it's his parents that are, like, giving him this look, and then he's like, nope. So, like, he feels bad, so he's, like, trying to sing to her, and he talks about, like, rewriting the stars, and at the end of the song, he ends up still getting rejected, even after the song, so that was a nice change of pace. So anyways, Barnum heads off, where, like, he's, like, now performing with the red-haired lady officially, and Charity sings this sort of, like, goodbye song as the girls try to follow him. So Barnum is now supporting, like, just the red-haired lady, and the rest of the circus is sort of just on Philip's shoulder at that point in time. So, you know, he's still trying to do his little flirty flirt with the trapeze lady, and she's still not, like, doing it, you know, whatever. Meanwhile, while that's happening, the other lady, the red-haired lady, is doing her performance, and she's also being dejected by the main character, Mr. Burnham. But after the performance, he ended up, like, kissing her for some reason. I guess it was for publicity, but it was taken out of context. You know, I guess that's why they kissed. I forgot if he said anything, but anyways, so Philip is talking so, like, these guys that were, like, I think they were part of the crew that were, like, yelling and complaining at them. So they end up, like, in this little fight, and one of the guys ends up, like, throwing a little lantern at the circus, which burst into flames. So the entire circus ends up in flames, and Burnham, you know, is, like, starting to head out and see this. Philip runs into the building because I believe the trapeze lady was still in there at the point in time, but she ends up running out, like, separately, but then Burnham has to go in to save him, so he's, like, a little bit burned, and then you know, they carry him out essentially. So the area's in shambles and so on and so forth. So anyways, the critic sits with Mr. Burnham, and he's trying to build him up because the critic was like, you know, your performance was pretty good, and then later on he's like, oh, you know, you're trying to show the better part of humanity and stuff like that. But in the light of this, he sees that this whole scandal thing with the kiss that I mentioned earlier is now being raised in the newspaper. So Charity finds out and wants to leave, so she does. So he goes out on his own to drink his sorrows away, while the rest of the circus team joins in and tries to cheer him up. He sings about, you know, how he tried to trace his dreams, but he got lost in the process and ended up doing this whole other thing. And the rest of the circus helps him find out, you know, get back on the right path, and so on and so forth. He ends up catching this train. Meanwhile, Philip finally gets to kiss the trapeze girl when he wakes up. So meanwhile, Barnum is going back to where he knows his wife went, I guess. So he sings to her about, you know, restarting, like a second chance, essentially, and she sings back. And afterwards, they return to the wreckage and the rest of the crew, trying to figure out where to go. And Philip and Barnum finally decide to go on equal terms, because early in the review I mentioned how it was like 10%, and now it's 50-50. So Barnum somehow discovers that there is a tent somewhere. It's like, I guess, like near a coast area. And while they're in this tent, we see them perform perhaps one of their more extravagant performances, and they claim it as their new home. officially dubbing it an official circus. Because the first building wasn't a circus-like building, it was a museum at first. This was a tent, which is how in movies anyways, we usually recognize circuses. They usually take place in tents and so on and so forth. So anyways, Burnham gives Philip the reins with the little hat, and he's able to go out and take over the performance while Burnham goes to visit his family via elephant. So Philip gets another kiss from the trapeze girl. The elder daughter, the one I told you about, the one that did ballet, is she did I believe 2 or 3 performances during the entire movie. She does another one here at the end, and this is what causes Burnham to see true happiness for what it is, and finally have everything he truly desired from the start of the film, and that is The Greatest Showman. And I actually really enjoyed this film. The music, as I mentioned, has this really nice transition from song to song. They have, again, this very similar tune, and the performances are very excellently carried out by Hugh Jackman, and even Zac Efron, and even the other characters. The bearded lady also has a tremendous singing voice as well. She gets her moment to shine. As I mentioned, when she's trying to cheer up the rest of the crew, that was one of her times to shine, and she shines later on in the movie during the end as well. So, again, the music is really great here. I really enjoyed the music. That is the focus of this movie, so props on that. There are a few cliches here and there that, the lowest moment, you have to build up the main character to overcome that hurdle, But I think they do a pretty good job of overcoming the really obvious cliches with the performances. I believe the performances carry the cliches because, these cliches have been done over and over again. So having them done through the music, in my opinion, helps out. Help us get past the obvious, he has to get his confidence back. Stuff like that. Other than that, I really enjoyed this movie. So I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie, and I'm glad now that I definitely waited to do my top 10 because I think this might make the list. So that's something to definitely consider. So definitely glad I waited. If you haven't seen it yet, and if you're a fan of musicals, if you're a fan of La La Land as it says on the poster, I would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. So with that being said, that is my review, and if you enjoyed my review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out the link in the description. It'll head you over to my Patreon. Any donations are greatly appreciated now more than ever. And until next time, everyone, bye!